Poco a poco vamos a llegar. Somos peregrinos and you know that's who we are. We make our way. Hey, hey.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Father Mark Mary with the Franciscan Friars, the Renewal, and you are listening to the Poco Podcast. This is the new podcast of the Franciscan Friars, the Renewal, and this is going to be different than our episodes coming down. We have been working on this podcast and recording episodes for literally months, and typically it's going to be myself, Father Mark Mary, with Father Innocent and Father Angelus Montgomery. But like the rest of the world, we are smack dab in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and I'm currently recording from the South Bronx, New York, which is New York City. If you've been paying attention to it, is a bit of the epicenter of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic for New York. And so we are in quarantine here in the Bronx, and Father Angelus and Father Innocent both live in Harlem, and they're in quarantine with the brothers over there in Harlem at St. Joseph's Friary. And actually yesterday I had in the last 10 days, the very first time for me to go outside at all. We live in the Bronx. We have like a compound or a block, we call it, with 2 friaries, homeless shelter. So it's a decent amount of space. And so you can go outside, be in a courtyard. You can go on the roof of one of the buildings. You can get a little bit of fresh air. But just yesterday, I had the very first time, again, in about a week and a half of going out. And it was myself and Father PT, one of the other friar priests I live with. And we receive a food donation still in the South Bronx that basically gives fruits and vegetables for the week for the friaries in our little New York region. So we obeying all social distancing coronavirus protocol as we know it, and we're pretty darn good at it. We get a lot of announcements about it. We took some of the fruits and vegetables, a few boxes, because there's like 15 guys living in Harlem. Took the fruits and vegetables, took it in a van over to Harlem, rang the doorbell. We were putting the boxes out. They were at the front door. We had our 6 feet of space. We weren't handing boxes directly to them. I understand it's super important, but it feels super funny, right? When you're normally like giving the bros hugs or dapping them up or whatever. But because again, we're all like a little bit stir crazy. So there's like 6 or 7 of the guys who ended up the door, and we're talking from a distance. And this property has a couple of entrances. So all of a sudden, like 20 feet down to the right, there, Father Glenn Sudano, one of our priests, comes out of his little door, and he's on a stoop over there, and he's talking to us. And then whatever it was, a couple of minutes later, 3 stories up, Brother Colby, who's in isolation because he's had some symptoms, he pops his head out, and he's out the window, and he's talking to us. And then to the left, one of the other neighbors comes out, and then there's a gate, and another friar comes out. It was just funny because you could tell that as everybody was hearing human voices and they were so desiring human connection, they started popping out from everywhere. So we're having this fun little chat on the block, and it was really, really good, even though it was from a distance, and even though it was for a relatively short period of time. It was really, really good just to have time to chat with some of the bros. So normally we record there. Normally we would record at St. Joseph's, but we're not allowed inside of there right now because of what they have going on and what we have going on. So for these first couple of episodes, it's just going to be me, and we moved up actually the timeline for producing or publishing these to sort of respond to the quarantine life, and to the hope is that these are a source of spiritual encouragement and strength and guidance for the journey in general. But we're gonna move up the timeline a little bit, and hopefully that they are all of this, but for this unique time in life. And I think it's super important and super true and authentic just to, first of all of you who are listening out there, everyone's experiencing this situation differently. For nobody that I know of is it anything positive, but for some it's really, really, really a difficult time of suffering and struggle. And so for those of you who are sick, or who have loved ones or people you care about who are sick, if this is causing separation, financial stress, and real time of uncertainty and doubt, please know our prayers, like 100%, our hearts and our prayers are with you. And for all those out there who are responding, who are on the front lines, especially in the medical world, um, the researchers, those trying to come up with vaccines and figure out a solution and responding and taking care of those who are suffering, like 100%, our prayers are with you. At the same time, we realize that not everybody is experiencing this the same. And so for a lot of people, this is a time to be at home and either attempting to work from home or attempting to live some sort of life from home. And, at least what I know is more New York in the States, it's maybe 10 days, 2 weeks into being quarantined. And it looks like we have another month maybe to go. And kind of have to figure out to some degree how to live again, right? Or how to live under these circumstances. And at this time of quarantine, I can't imagine a group of people being more prepared to respond than the Catholic Church. Because the church, right, we have this incredibly deep and profound tradition of monasticism and cloistered religious life, which we have been living and which has given us a patrimony that is centuries and centuries and centuries, 15, 16, 1700 years old at its early sort of inception. So we got a lot of experience of living life with significant physical restrictions. And I one thing I want to say that sometimes is neglected or overlooked is what has been going on in these walls, like the monastery walls for these centuries, is obviously not universally, but for the most part, we have incredibly like motivated and driven people who live a profound life of prayer, but also are constantly experiencing a profound study of their own humanity and the way in which human beings interact and live with one another. And these different monasteries have sprouted up over centuries in different cultures, in different countries. And so there's a huge selection, a very, very diverse group of people who have been living this life. But what really is striking to me is if you look at it, there is there's commonality. They have a lot in common. For the sake of this conversation, one of the commonalities, which to my knowledge is literally across the board, is we'll call it a rhythm of life or a schedule. I think the proper Latin term might be like an horarium. They have a life with order, and they have certain things that they do at certain times, and this is lived over an extended period of time. That didn't come immediately from divine revelation. There's no words where Jesus said, like, thou shalt wake up at this time in the morning and go to the chapel. But over the years, through, again, the study of the heart of God in prayer and the study of humanity and community life, this pattern and this response, you can call it a medicine or a support, developed because it's just good for us. It's just good for us. And we see rhythm, and we see intentionality, and we see patterns in time in so many different spheres. I think of, quite simply, if we look at the lunar or the solar, movements and schedules and rhythms, and we have the rotation around the sun, and we have days, and we have seasons. Like, there are very much rhythms and patterns in nature, and these are really important, right? Like, if we all of a sudden started to have across the globe, we started to have 28-hour days, there'd be issues. If all of a sudden we started slower in our revolution around the sun, there'd be issues. The rhythm's important. And we see this again now if we go on a little bit of a more micro level in the human person, right? Like, we have, from my understanding, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but I'm not totally dumb. I don't think we have. We're kind of built. The human biology is built for patterns. Like, it's good for us to wake up at a certain time consistently, or to eat at consistent times, to go to bed at consistent times. That this is just, the human body has these rhythmic capacities, or these tendencies, that's helpful to pay attention to, and to build a life around. And I obviously, I do not have experience raising my own children, but compared to those who have it, I have like probably less than 1.5% of insight into this area of humanity. But just from my own nieces growing up, hearing stories about friends who have kids, is right. Like, if your young son or daughter doesn't get their nap when they're supposed to, or they didn't get enough food when they were supposed to, like, you can tell because it caused an issue. So all of this is just to sort of, to really, really emphasize pattern or intentionality or rhythm are good. And when you've seen people living this for centuries, and for many of our great saints and human beings to have come from these monastic or these cloistered religious expressions of life, or to see other areas of excellence, such as sports or military or family or church, like the church, right? The church liturgical calendar. When we see these and all these across these areas across the board, it's good for us to pay attention to them. And what I want to do, though, is I want to take this principle and I want to look at it in a very, very specific situation. And I want to do so in a way which is helpful for us who are in a time of quarantine, but also it's going to be very helpful, I think, for all of us when we have a little bit more freedom with our movements, or a little bit more instability, or a little bit less control over our day.
Hey, this is Rob from Spirit Juice. I'm going to let you know that Spirit Juice Studios is available during quarantine for any of your post-production needs. Are you sitting on a bunch of footage you want edited? Do you want to start your podcast? You need some help doing some live streaming? Shoot us an email at spiritjuicestudios.com, and we'd love to help you out.
When this time of quarantine came upon us, I thought about religious life, and I thought about monasticism, but I thought about a very particular person. His story came to mind immediately for me as I started thinking of the quarantine as a place to go to glean from his wisdom, to get some inspiration. And the person is Father Walter Chiswick. Father Walter Chiswick, he's currently deceased, but he was a Jesuit priest who lived in about the mid 20th century. And he wrote two books. One book is called With God in Russia. And a second book is called, he wrote or co-wrote at least two books that I'm familiar with. One is With God in Russia, and the second is He Leadeth Me. And it's the story of Father Walter Chiswick's 23 years as a priest in Soviet prisons and Siberian labor camps. And I first read these books when I was a novice. And the story is so striking and so profound. It's really, really hard to put down. And it's really, really hard to forget. And I find that in Father Walter Chiswick, there's a wisdom and there's an experience which is excellent, which is really, really helpful for our own time. But also there's going to be a ton of wisdom that we can glean very, very quickly, which is going to be helpful for us when we're no longer in a time of quarantine, when we have even a little bit less, maybe control over our schedule. For those of us who are a little bit more, stuck at home these days. And so what I want to do is this. I'm just going to introduce a little bit the story very, very quickly of Father Walter Chiswick, and then get into some details and unpack those. So Father Walter Chiswick, again, he was born and raised in Pennsylvania. And pretty quickly, as a young man, he felt a desire to be a Jesuit, to be a priest. And through a series of factors, but most importantly, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he really, really wanted to be a priest for the people of Russia. He really, really wanted to go to Russia. And so he gave himself, as a young Jesuit, as a young seminarian, he gave himself radically and totally into the study of Russian language, Russian culture, Russian food, Russian literature, Russian geography, everything he could learn about Russia, and everything he can learn about the Russian mind and the Russian view and the Russian sensibilities he studied, so that eventually he'd be as well prepared as possible to introduce them to the person of Jesus Christ in a way which would be efficacious and fruitful. And so we're gonna go pretty quickly through from his studies to being ordained, to being in Russia, to being arrested. There's a lot of different factors going on, but this was a time of wild decisions and really, really, really it was a really, really difficult time. Sort of these mid to early 20th century. And so Father Walter Chiswick, he gets arrested and he gets brought in under the pretense of being a Vatican spy. And so for one of his first stints, he ends up in this Soviet prison, which is like an interrogation camp. And so he tells the story of being in this one little room and just the constant work of the Soviets to keep him unsettled, waking him up in the middle of the night, making loud noises, getting him off any sort of rhythm, getting him unsettled, changing when he would eat, what he'd be able to do, to be kind of like spying on him, to shock him, to scare him, just all of these different behaviors to make him lose his orientation. And this goes on and this goes on and this goes on, and it definitely has a significant effect on him. And he's getting interrogated every day for hours, and he doesn't really know where he is. He doesn't know how long he's going to be there. He doesn't know really even, except for what he can pull from the questions. He doesn't even totally know why he's there. And so this goes on. And what ends up happening is there ends up being a period of time where the interrogations have taken a little bit of a break. Again, he's not told when they're going to begin again. And so now he has to spend all of his time in this tiny room. And so this is what he does. Now I'm going to page, this is from With God in Russia by Ignatius Press. And this is what Father Walter Chiswick says. So I began to organize my days as if I were in a Jesuit house back home. And I made up a daily order for myself. And just as soon as I got up in the morning, I would say the morning offering. Then, after the morning wash up, I would put in a solid hour of meditation. The 5:30 rising hour and 7 o'clock breakfast were much like the daily order in most of the Jesuit houses I'd been in. And the days began to fall into a pattern. After breakfast, I would say Mass by heart. That is, I would say all the prayers, for of course I couldn't celebrate the Holy Sacrifice. I said the Angelus, morning, noon, and night as the Kremlin clock chimed the hours. Before dinner, I would make my noon examination of conscience. Before going to bed at night, I'd make the evening examen and points for the morning meditation, following St. Ignatius's spiritual exercises. And so here's the beauty, right? Here's the beauty is in the midst of this time of great uncertainty and confusion and disorientation, Father Walter Chiswick, through his Jesuit training, had a founding or a guiding or a structuring rhythm of life. And so he started to live this rhythm. He first sort of planned it out and then lived it. And it became a source of support and of stability, even of comfort or encouragement for him, while everything else was out of his hands. And I think there's a ton about this which we should pay attention to. Like first and foremost, especially if you're in a time of quarantine right now, but in general in your life, like how do you have a structure? Do you have a structure? It doesn't nearly have to be, right? Like we're taking some principles lived in a very unique mode of life, very unique expression of life, monasticism or religious life or a Soviet prison. So it doesn't have to look exactly, and it's not going to be quite as strict in the life of a layperson, especially a layperson with work or family or a lot of different things out of their control. But is there a pattern of your life? Is there a pretty good, do you have a time where you wake up in the morning? Do you have a time where you pray in the morning? And then as you go about your day, again, is there a time in the afternoon where you have a time just to check in with the Lord? And again, in the evening. And I'm going to, for the sake of this podcast, I'm going to get into a couple of things very specifically. And we're gonna flesh it out again for our next episode. And so first is this, it's really important to me, especially in a time of quarantine, as a way of stabilizing, as a way of finding structure, as a way of keeping discipline and sort of keeping control, being self-determined in a wholly inappropriate way. Set an alarm, have a time you wake up, and then make your bed. And what I like about this is a couple things. First of all, it's really, really popular to talk about like the heroic moment, like waking up as soon as your alarm clock goes off. And I do think there's something really important about that. And there's a huge value about that. The problem is for a lot of people, that's really difficult. So like, what do you do? What do you do if you don't have the discipline just to get up immediately as your alarm goes off? Like, is your day shot? Do you just throw in the towel and you're like, okay, sorry, we'll get it tomorrow. Today I'm just gonna, lay in bed in my pajamas and eat Lay's potato chips and watch Netflix or whatever. Well, no, that's ridiculous, obviously. But I really love the idea of making your bed as sort of the moment, I don't know, like the mercy moment for the morning. Because it's a chance, it's like a second chance. So once you've gotten up, and maybe you didn't get up immediately when you wanted to, but now there's an opportunity in making your bed. That's another new chance to have a little act of discipline, to get the will engaged, to get a little victory under your belt, and to set yourself off on the right foot. It's like, okay, dang, you know what? The heroic moment, the harder moment of just waking up when I was supposed to, I missed that one. But now I'm going to make my bed. And there's just something, especially if you're being quarantined for an extended period of time, I think there's something extremely helpful and healthy about making your bed. So I'm just going to put that out there. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think that's a good idea. And then the encouragement is this, is kind of, there's a young woman named Jackie Mulligan who we interviewed her on the Essential Presents. She's sort of like a health and holiness specialist. And I really, really think that she knows what she's talking about. And she recently had something about do simple things consistently. And she was emphasizing the importance of just having a pattern and a structure and regularity to your life. And it's just, it's really, really true. For some people, again, like that involves some discipline. It involves discipline, but also forms discipline. And so if it's hard for you to have a structure and to keep to it, maybe ask for some help, maybe bring some other people in on it. But it's just something really, like, we don't want to overcomplicate this. Have a wake up time, have a time, get dressed, have a good breakfast, have your prayer time. And then in the afternoon, and we're going to get into this much more detail in the next episode, but he talks about having his afternoon examen. And again, that's going to be something pretty universal across religious life or priesthood, is the idea of having a time of prayer in the middle of the day, just to recheck in, to reorient, to to kind of look back on how the first part of your day was going, to look forward towards the future. And then in the evening, again, just having some sort of a time of prayer, to look back, to find rest in the Lord, to pray, to give thanks, to ask for his mercy, and to prepare yourself for the new day. And I'm just going to share again one little testimony. In the beginnings of my religious life, I have lived, probably 10. I lived, so I entered religious life. I moved from California, came out to New York. I lived in Harlem for 6 months. I was in Newark, New Jersey for a year. I was in Harlem for 14 months. I was in Honduras for 2 years. I was then I went to Yonkers, where I went to seminary for 4 years. Then I went to one house in the Bronx for about a year, and now I'm at a different house in the Bronx for about a year. And so I've traveled a lot, and I've moved a lot in the last decade or so. But also within part of my work involves traveling. And so I've had spans where I've slept in 6 different places in the span of 8 days. And that's hard. I'm not going to say that in any way that I thrive in that setting and that I live a perfect, balanced, structured life, even in the midst of sort of the chaos and the confusion and the uncertainty. But I have found consistently, like the breviary, particularly like in traveling, breviary, holy hour, holy mass, these staples of prayer, these staples of my prayer life, but these staples of my life are places of familiarity and of comfort and of orientation and of encouragement. And that I can grab onto these no matter what else is going on around me and find security and have this place where it's like, okay, I know where I am. I know how to be here. And how beautiful it is when it's spiritual, right? How beautiful it is when this is these times, these points of clarity, these shining stars kind of in the night sky, are points of relationship with the Lord. And again, it's just, so wherever I've gone, especially particularly as a friar, like whatever friary I've gone in or I've visited, there's always this moment where you enter into the life of prayer, which is the same across all of the friaries in all the different countries. And you can just have this deep breath of, okay, I'm home. I'm with the Lord. I'm with the brothers. I'm in the prayer life. I'm home. And so it takes, right, like to have some structure. It takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of discipline. It takes a little sacrifice. It takes a little bit of effort. But authentic rest is going to be the fruit of labor. And so it takes a little bit of work, but the work it's all worth it. And we're gonna conclude sort of with this. And my encouragement is the time of quarantine. It's a difficult time, and it's a real struggle and a real suffering for so many of us. But the Lord he's in the business not of causing difficulty or causing suffering, but of always entering into and trying to bring something good and something beautiful and something fruitful about it. Like we hear about the Lord being this person who comes into a desert and brings it and transforms it into land flowing with water and with fruitfulness and with sweetness. And the Lord wants to do that in each of our lives if we invite him in the quarantine, right? Romans 8:28, for God is at work for the good in all things for those who love him. This is a beautiful opportunity to invite the Lord into our life, to listen to his voice, and to build and get a taste for some healthy patterns. Especially it seems like I'm recording this particular episode when it seems like we have a month to go in the quarantine. You can really do a lot of pattern developing and foundation laying in a month. So I'm gonna invite you to prayerfully reflect upon the development of a healthy and appropriate for your state in life and who you are rhythm, and to start to practice that and start to live it, and just to live this in a way which is reflective as well. Just when you have these constant points to reflect upon and to reference, the amount of self-knowledge that you can grow in is just unbelievable. And it worked for Father Walter Chiswick, who I think for most of us, I don't know all of your situations, but for most of us, his experience of being in this labor camp or this interrogation prison for a couple of decades is much more serious than anything that we were experiencing for most of us. But this was an answer to his situation. And I think it can be an answer and a place of hope and comfort and renewal for us in our own situations. So just throw that out there for you. And again, we thank you for listening. We thank you for listening to this first episode of the Poco Podcast. And we're only going to get better. That's the good news. It's only going to get better from here. And please know that we will 100% continue to keep you in our prayers. And if we'd love to hear from you, 100% would love to hear from you. So if you could, we have an email address, pocopodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your questions. Let us know what's going on. We're doing things a little bit quicker here. So if you get some real questions or some real things you want us to talk about in the midst of the pandemic, is it still going on in the midst of the quarantine? Let us know, pocopodcast@gmail.com. And again, we love your support, your help, your encouragement to help us get the word out. So if this has been helpful for you, if you could, give us a positive rating, give us a share, help let the world know, help let those who might be served and edified by this type of podcast, let them know that it exists. And we'll keep you in prayer and can't wait to be with you again on the next episode. God bless you all. Take care. Stay safe and pray well.
Poco a poco vamos a llegar. Somos peregrinos and you know that's who we are. We make our way. Hey, hey. Little by little we learn a little more each day that God is love, that life is short, that all will be well. And I know all will be well in His time. Come follow me, come follow me.